We're going ape spit bananas on Amigos, everything Amiga. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Amigos. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we're talking about Toki. Aaron, have you ever been one Toki over the line?
Well, it's funny, but when you're involved in that sort of thing, that line seems to move a little bit, man. And so I think I've been dancing on the line. I don't know if I ever went over it or not.
You know, that song appeared on the Lawrence Welk program, if you can believe it.
What?
I guess Lawrence Welk didn't know what the song was about, but he heard the name Jesus in the song, and he said, well, it must be okay.
Oh.
And so later on, he found out he was not pleased. Are you familiar with the Lawrence Welk program?
Oh, man. It's funny, because I'm back in the day, I've been around for so long that when I was a little kid, again, you had 3 channels and a UHF channel. That was it.
Mhm.
And on UHF, the only thing you could get was the local PBS channel. That's all you got around here anyway. And they inevitably, every Sunday, it'd be Lawrence Welk time. And I'd sit through that show. It was all it was on. And my parents watched it every week. And man, that show was a real snoozer boat. And so I will say, I wouldn't have known what that meant either back in the day. I probably would have just cast it aside with all the other low-end stuff that Lawrence Welk did. I mean, I know Lawrence Welk is super famous, and the funny thing is I remember reading about him because he's got that really interesting accent, a one and a two. But he's from like Iowa or something. I mean, he's not even...
I don't know. It's weird because I always associate Lawrence Welk with my dad. That was his favorite show.
Yeah.
And in his final years, one of the things that we always did together is I'd go over there on Saturday night and we'd fire up the Lawrence Welk show on PBS.
Oh, man.
But it is weird because he had an encyclopedic knowledge of everyone on the show. He was like you with wrestling. I would be like, who's that guy in the back on the right? And he's like, oh, this guy is blah, blah, blah. He was in the Army from 42 to 44.
Yeah.
The one question that he could never answer is, why does a man that was born and raised in the United States sound like Lawrence Welk?
Yeah.
Because it was obviously some sort of, I don't know if he was trying to be continental, trying to be more dashing than he was, but he definitely had an accent that was not native to his homeland of Iowa or Minnesota or wherever he was from.
He was like Iowa's version of Tommy Wiseau. Just this accent that could not be labeled or placed. It's like no one knows where it's from, but it existed.
Yeah. So, did you watch the fight, Aaron? The old Tyson Fury versus, speaking of gorilla-like men, did you watch Fury and the guy from the Ukraine, Usyk?
I did. Of course, this fight would have been months ago at this point. But yes, I did watch the fight.
I just found out about it.
Yeah, where have you been, Bo? This happened months ago.
I literally thought it was like 3 days ago.
You're out of your mind. I will say I did. From what I recall, I even scored the fight back in the day, and I thought it was a fair. I mean, the judges are morons. I will say that. One of the judges had it for Fury, which was wrong. There's on no planet did Fury win that fight. But I love Fury too, and even he thought he won the fight, but he didn't really think that.
No.
It was a style. This happens occasionally when you have a cruiserweight come up to heavyweight and fight a guy who's used to fighting huge guys, and he's fighting a guy who's more technically savvy, quicker, who fights in a different way than smaller fighters. And so you think to yourself, a guy that's 6'9" could just crush a little guy. But sometimes you've got a guy that's smooth enough that to get away with it. Plus, who packs a little bit of power. I love Tyson Fury, and I know they'll be back. I mean, Tyson Fury is well past his expiration date, I think. Because I don't think his heart's in boxing. Yeah, he's retired already once, and he talked about wrestling and doing some other stuff. I think his heart's not in boxing like it was. That doesn't mean he's not a capable fighter. I just think that I wasn't I'm not sure a younger Tyson Fury would have lost this guy. But the rematch would be interesting.
Do you think he can just go in the UFC and just dominate because of his skills?
Who?
Tyson Fury.
Why do you think he's going to the UFC?
Why isn't that what happens when a boxer gets older and retires? They go to the UFC.
Name any boxer that's ever done that. I can name one.
I don't know. I
None
don't
of
really know
them.
much about
No
combat sports. Is
boxers
that
go
not how it
because
works?
they
I
get.
thought
If they,
it was like boxing and then UFC and then wrestling and then you're
no,
out.
there was a very famous. Well, it's not that famous. Randy Couture fought a boxer. I wish I could remember which boxer it was. I think the guy he fought was a. Oh boy, his name will come to me. Anyway, he crushed this guy in about 1 second because boxers aren't MMA is not their bag. They get one shot at it. They can punch a guy one time, and if they don't knock him down, then they're in deep trouble, and then they lose. I mean, there have been a few boxers in UFC that were just straight boxers, and they got humiliated. So,
oh, okay.
No, and Tyson Fury, I can tell you right now, his ground game at his age, 35 years old, he's not going to be going in there and fighting anybody. Plus, he'll be in there with all heavyweights. And you think to him, you might have a chance. But the heavyweights, a lot of them are pretty skilled. They're not going to go in there and trade blows. Plus, Tyson Fury's not a real big puncher. He's a jab guy. So it's not like he's Mike Tyson or somebody who was
I was
renowned
thinking about,
for his knockouts.
I remember that one fight where he would just lean on the guy the whole fight, put his weight on him. Figured you could work that into MMA.
Yeah, except the difference is in MMA, they just throw you down. They don't just sit there and let you just lean on them. If that was the case, I could be UFC champ. I'm great at leaning on stuff. But if it fights back, I'm screwed, Bode.
Well, speaking of a guy with a good ground game, Aaron, let's talk about Toki. All right, Aaron. Well, before we start, I should let you know that my original open for the show was going to be a riff on the Hokey Pokey.
Okay? Oh, nice! I like that one too. That's also good.
And did you know that in the UK, the Hokey Pokey is known as the Hokey Cokey?
Cokey?
Yeah, Cokey.
Everything with this guy's name is drug related, Bode, for some reason. No, I've never heard that. So they do the Hokey Pokey, but it's a Cokey. Why is it different? And where was it the Cokey before it was the Pokey?
Yes. I think that our somebody heard it wrong and then brought it to the United States.
Yeah,
and it's that old gimmick. And
sorry, everybody. To be fair, Hokey Pokey sounds a lot better than Hokey Cokey.
Hokey Cokey sounds like Richard Pryor. So
I think it's an upgrade, man.
Yeah. And speaking of upgrades, Aaron, let's talk about this arcade game. So this is a game that was released in 1989. Was developed by the TAD Corporation. They are a Japanese outfit. Akira Sakuma was the programmer. Tatsuyusa Uemura was the composer of the music. This was also designed by Nobuyuki Kuroki. Okay. Now, all of these guys worked on various other games that you've heard about. Akira Sakuma, did Cabal and did Blood Brothers. Tatsuya Uemura, nothing that he's done I've ever heard of. I've sort of heard of Zero Wing, but I feel like that might be like another Gundam thing.
I've heard of Zero Wing. It's a shmup.
And then old Kuroki, he was a big guy for SNK later on. He designed King of Fighters 97 and Garu Mark of the Wolves.
Oh yeah.
So
okay.
Those are
both pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, he went on to a storied career in SNK. So this game was like I said, released in 1999, and it is sort of a strange game. It's known in Japan as Juju Densu. I think that's where we get the phrase "bad juju" from. They're talking about the original release of Toki in Japan.
Really? Are you just making that up, or are you serious?
Well, where else have you heard the word juju?
I thought juju was like something that came down from like Jamaica, like
a voodoo thing.
Well, I mean, I've heard the term bad juju, but I always thought that was more of a Creole type thing, not a Japanese thing.
Oh, maybe you're right. I'm not sure. In this game, you play as Toki. Toki is a Tarzan-like guy Is there another? Was Tarzan alone in terms of the Jungle Man of the early 20th century, or were there other sort of like Tarzan-alikes out there?
Well, I mean, if you want to put, if we're talking about video games, there was Tarzan, then there was Jungle King because
Yeah,
they
true.
got sued, and then there was the pith helmeted guy. So there were actually,
Hmm.
I guess, how about that? There's three different ones right there.
Well, this guy definitely resembles more of the Jungle King slash Tarzan mentality. He's got the loincloth, he's got the furry bandolier, and he's got a woman, of course. And the woman's name is Miho. And
The comedy
Toki and
writes
Miho.
itself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Toki and Miho are living a beautiful life together until the nefarious wizard Vuka Medio kidnaps Miho and transforms Toki into a. I'm not sure if he's a monkey or an ape, a chimpanzee.
I've heard a Neanderthal ape. That's what I've heard him
Okay,
described
our
as.
monkeys and apes are different, right? Or does a
That's true.
chimpanzee grow up to be a monkey?
No, nope. They're different.
Okay,
Monkeys grow up to be bigger monkeys.
okay, it's okay. It's not like a losing of the tail situation.
No, no, I don't think so.
Okay. I don't know
No.
much about biology
You
or
need to write some books, my friend. I'd like to see that'd be high comedy. I'm glad you're
um
teaching band.
yeah, I definitely don't need to be teaching anything else. All right. Now, this game I would describe as a platform shooter, a run and gun type game. That is in the vein of a game like Contra. Um, you traverse through the levels, gaining power ups and destroying enemies. There are some platforming challenges. There are some jumps you have to negotiate. You have to avoid enemies. Um,
It reminds me
and
more of
so
like a Mario. Because think about it, Mario
really,
shoots fire. Mario shoots bullets. Mario has to jump on stuff. Mario fights plants. That's. I mean, I'm not saying it necessarily plays like Mario, but like the enemies, the stuff you do. It's sort
well,
of
I,
like
I think it's a
Mario.
good. I think it's a good discussion point because to me, what separates a run and gun game from a platformer is how often you're mashing the fire button.
Yeah.
When you play Mario, you're not constantly hitting the fireball over and over and over again. In fact, you don't have the fireball the majority of the game. Most of the game is traversing. You're jumping. You are killing enemies, but you're jumping on them. You're not shooting them. Does that
You're
make
also
sense
not
between the
fighting like
different?
you're not fighting fleets of aerial guys like
Yeah,
Toki
yeah,
has to. That right there is where the gun is. That I think that's where it changes the most. I mean, a lot of the stuff that Toki does, you would do in a Mario game. I mean, you're right. You do it more in this, but you shoot more. But I mean, you like I said, sometimes you've got fire like Mario. Sometimes you've got different types of bullets that do have different patterns, which is not Mario like. So but I can see there's a certain reminds me a little bit of it.
yeah, yeah. And so you traverse through a long section of levels where you go between. You have a forest, you have a caverns, you've got an ice level, and at the end of each one of these levels, you have a boss that you've got to defeat. And the final boss, of course, is the old Vucamedio, and then when you defeat him, you win the game and you're reunited with Miho. Um, this game, I would say, in the arcades is pretty unique. Um, it kind of combines, like you said, like that sort of like Japanese cutesy platformer with the Japanese run and gun game, or even the Japanese horizontally scrolling shooter, like you said, because of the way that the aerial enemies sort of fly across the screen. Would you? I mean, to me, this is pretty unique. Would you call it a unique arcade game?
This game reminds me. It's like someone said, "Listen, we like the kind of gameplay that was in like Ghouls and Ghosts, that kind
Mm-hmm.
of real hard stuff bouncing up in front of you type stuff. But we need to we need to shoot it up, add a little Mario element to it. So it's sort of like that's what it reminds me of, a combination. Because there are plenty of parts of this that remind me of like Ghouls and Ghosts or Ghosts and Goblins. I mean, the graphics in this are bigger, but I mean, it's the way stuff is sprung on you that reminds me of it, and also the difficulty in some areas, and the fact that, like, I mean, Ghouls and Ghosts, you can get hit twice and you're dead. In this, you could get hit once and you're dead. And this, to me, that's the big separator, because it feels like this should be a game where you have a power bar. I'm saying, like, where you can take multiple hits.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, when this was in the arcade, I've seen this game at least one time, because I remember seeing it. And I remember looking at it and thinking to myself, this looks really unappealing. And I've never played this in the arcade, not one time. I've played the arcade version, but I never actually played it in the arcade. And I don't know how well it did in the States, but I'm guessing in '89 it probably didn't do that good.
I've never seen this in the arcade before. I'm sure the Galloping Ghost has it, but if I did see it, I would just walk right past it, because this is the game that I remember when we played this first on our first go round with this. There's just something about the gameplay and the graphics, really the whole game. There's not much that really appeals to me in this game. I think Toki looks kind of dumb, you know. Video games, I've talked about this before, are the ultimate power fantasy for me. I don't want to look like a geek, because I can do that without playing a video game. I want to look like a man. I want to look like a cool dude. In Toki, like, you can make an ape look cool. It is totally within the powers of the artist to make a cool looking ape. But this guy, not looking awesome, and when he spits, like, his projectiles come out of his mouth, which I gotta, hats off to the designers for adding that level of realism, because it's not like Mario where he just kind of throws something from nothing. At least these, fireballs emanate from Toki's gut. But when he spits them, his eyes bug out. He just looks dumb. He doesn't look cool at all. And it's such a contrast, because the rest of the game is actually drawn pretty well.
Well, I mean, I agree with you 100%. This is to me, this is an unappealing
Look at him as
game.
we're watching here. He looks dumb.
Yeah, now he just became a man again. He looks so much better. But this is I think also this game is quite unappealing, and you're right. I mean, there are some of the elements are dumb too. No one's going to think to themselves, "Hey, this was designed in the USA or in Europe. This is Japanese as heck, man." But it's got elements in it. It's one of those games where, like, I wonder if they put this in to appeal to the East. There's some things in it that I thought are just goofy. And I'm like you. Listen, some games are funny. Like Liquid Kids is a goofy game. And I'll use that as an example. That's a game sort of like this, where you run around and shoot stuff, and it's a long scrolling adventure where you shoot stuff. But it's a cuter, like, they went more cute than this. You can't straddle the line between cute and sort of like cool, because when you do that, it's not cool and it's not cute. It's whatever that is in between, which is not that good. Fronts. Yeah, and so what you get here with Toki is like, I mean, remember in Shadow of the Beast? It has a similar plot where the guy turns you into a geek. But in Shadow of the Beast, at least you're a dork that looks cool, like a demon or something,
Right.
This guy just looks like a geek. And it's hard for me, because there are elements of this game I really like. And it's funny, I was playing this, and I kept thinking to myself, this has got some good stuff. This has got some creative stuff. But I mean, the whole time I just, like, want to murder it. Because aside from the fact that it has some stuff in it that I don't like, it is a very unappealing. I mean, I hate to talk about it, but it's the number one takeaway from the first time we looked at it. It's my number one takeaway now. He looks dumb.
This game also had the unfortunate timing of coming out at a time where games like this could easily appear on any number of computers or consoles without losing much graphical fidelity. So if you're trying to lure people into the arcade and you're trying to lure them in with Toki, you could fire up a game that looks very similar to this on the Sega Genesis, which was out in Japan at the time.
Yeah, 89. There was a lot of competition that could have. I mean, the Amiga did a pretty decent job of pulling off a very similar looking game. So I would agree with that. But it's not without its charm.
Yeah, but you're right, and there are some cool things, like when Toki dons a variety of outfits. He wears an American football helmet, which is not a good look for Toki.
No,
It's a
he looks
dumb
like a
look.
bigger doofus then.
Yeah, yeah. He manages to look even less cool wearing that helmet. Now, when he goes underwater, he puts on a set of diving goggles,
Yeah.
and he looks okay. That looks all right. He reminds me of Flood. Remember that platformer we played, Flood, on the
Yeah.
Amiga? Yeah, he kind of reminds me of that. That's not a high bar, but I mean, it is what it is.
He still
Um,
looks like a tool, though. That's the
but the
problem.
biggest thing is that you traverse this game going through and doing nothing but firing all the time. And when you're
Yeah.
just watching your character spit out this stuff with his eyes bugging out,
Yeah.
it just makes you want to turn it off.
It does.
Toki came out on a variety of platforms. Of course, we're going to get deep into the Amiga version next, but I just wanted to go through these really quick. This came out for the Spectrum, had a Spectrum release, a C64 release, a release on the Lynx. So this is one of the few games that came out, the relatively few games that came out for the Lynx. This came out on the Sega Genesis and the Nintendo Entertainment System. I believe actually the Sega Genesis version was a sequel, a totally different game. But the NES version is notable because you talked about it would be. This seems like a game where having a life bar would be advantageous, and the developers of the NES agreed with you. They actually gave Toki 2 hearts, so you can take 2 hits before you die in this game. So that is, and of course the big one is in 2018. Toki received a remastered edition for the Nintendo Switch, just sort of out of nowhere. Was developed by Microids. It's the same game. It's a lot like Super Frog HD. It's the same game, but it's got totally redrawn graphics and better music. And it has there are some things that they changed about the gameplay too, but the level wise and everything, the stages are pretty much the same. Did you have a chance to check that out, Aaron?
I did not. I did not. I knew. It's funny. I did know about it because one time I was flipping through and I saw it was up there and I was like, oh, there's that. But I mean, that was literally the extent of it. You know, you mentioned. It's funny that you mentioned when you were talking about the systems this came out on. You were not wrong. You can now play this on the Spectrum, but this wasn't originally released on the Spectrum.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, it would even advertise that it had screenshots. But the funny thing is, if you roll over to our personal favorite itch.io, someone went in there and did a Spectrum port of the game.
Oh.
Just fairly recently. It's called Toki Mall. It's for the 128. And you can go over to itch.io and check that out. You can just look it up, Toki, like animal, but Tokimal. But yeah, for whatever reason, this didn't get a release on the original release on the ZX. I found that a couple places, and I was like, that doesn't seem right. And I went and double checked, and sure enough, World of Spectrum, like this never got released. So, but yeah, I thought that was kind of goofy because this game. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I want to talk a little bit more before we move on over to the Amiga version. One thing is, do you notice the plasma rope from Turrican 3 making an appearance here?
I don't think there's a too big. Yeah, it looks the same. Yeah, you're right. Except he could get on and off of it a lot easier.
Yeah. There are some things that I enjoyed about Toki. He is very maneuverable. He can do almost anything you ask him to do. He can duck. He can climb things, and when he climbs things on like a lot of games, he maintains his full range of ammunition as he's climbing. You can fire in multiple directions while you're on a vine. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Toki does lack the ability to slide down slopes, which it seems like something that he would have because there's a lot of those slopes in this game.
Yeah, they're slanted, just like you'd think like Zool style. I thought the same thing. Yeah.
Right. But the big thing is that one of the biggest problems that I have with the game is that when you die, you don't immediately come back where you die.
Oh,
and in a game like this, that's a must-have. It's a must-have to regenerate when you die if it's a one-hit kill game. And there's precedent. I mean, like, if you just look at Contra, look at R-Type. Any of those games, when you die, maybe not R-Type. I'm not as familiar with R-Type, but definitely in Contra, when you die, you start right where you left off, and that helps you. It's very demoralizing to be killed by something dumb, like when you blow up a plant and it shoots a spike and it kills you, and you're like, man, gotta go back again.
And the continues are just as bad because they make you redo the whole level, which is
Yeah.
double brutal.
Yeah.
You know,
And then the last thing I want to talk about is the power-up system. The power-up system is cool in that you get a lot of different power-ups. There's a fire-breathing mechanic, there's a multi-shot, there's a big shot, but it commits the cardinal sin of run-and-gun games, and that is the power-ups are time contingent.
Yeah.
No matter how well you play, after about 30 seconds, you lose whatever power up you have, and you're back to the original blaster. That sucks, and that's no good.
Yeah, and it makes. I mean, why do we get these? Think
Yeah.
about it. I mean, think about if they timed. Again, I hate. We always do this. But we're gonna do it again. What if they timed the power ups you got in, like Super Mario? You know, that would be. Think about it. It would radically change the game, and not in a good way. And this game, I don't know if they thought. And by the way, it's not like the power ups mean you're the
Invincible
God of
killing
War.
machine.
You
Right.
know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's that
Yeah.
sometimes they help a little. It's not like
Mhm.
you're the King Dong. They've only got 4 of them. You know, the spread, the bouncers. The bouncers aren't that good, by the way. The big shot and the flames. The flames are situational. So yeah, that is stupid, and that's just the way they programmed it. This is one. You know, we talked about, and both you especially, but I do it too. We glorify the Japanese for their gameplay choices and stuff. But this is one of those times where I'm not gonna glorify him. I mean, don't get me wrong.
This is not an all-time great. It's
No.
not even an all-time good.
I mean, the thing is, we're burying the arcade versions, but it's not that bad. But it's not the best.
Whenever you put out a game in Japan, you're standing amongst the tall trees.
Yeah, I mean, this looks like the kind of game that you would play in 1989 when the arcades are drying up. You know.
Yep.
And they're like, well, what else can we do? How about this? How about that? Well, that worked. Let's try to combine these two genres and do this. And I think that's what you get. I don't know how successful this game did. I mean, I don't know if this is some kind of big deal in Japan. I bet it's not.
I didn't find any sales data on.
There was no
Toki,
sequels or anything either, were there?
Just on the Genesis. The Genesis got that. It's called Going Ape Spit. So they use that gag too.
That's horrible.
And,
who would buy that?
I'm not going to buy a game. I'm not going to buy a game that says ape spit on the cover. I'm sorry.
That's a disaster. That's a disaster of a title right there, Bo. Horrible.
Yeah. Just looking down here at Clove just to see some eBay listings. Looks like that you can get a JAMA board for this. It says for faulty or for repair, so possibly not guaranteed working. $140. There's you can get the marquee for $20. But there are no listings for the machine. It doesn't look like there's been any recently sold data. So not much out there.
Not high, but
yeah, I'd agree with you.
Yeah.
Fun rating on Clove 3.35.
There you go. Well,
let's talk about the Amiga port, Aaron.
Okay, man, let's get into it. So, of course, Boat mentioned this got lots of conversions over, and you know, Ocean is always standing by to grab hold of one of these bad boys and send it down the line. And that's exactly what they did in 1991, Boat. They sent it down the line. And Toki was released on the Amiga. This is the ECS OCS. This was actually a small team that did this, and it was from what I've read, it was done by Ocean France.
Okay,
the people that did that put this together. This does, for some reason, this does feel like something I could see getting over in France. I don't know why. I don't have any reason to say that. It just does. The coder was a guy named Mikhail Janicki, who, get this, he was involved in another game with Topless Girl. He did Beach Volley. Beach Volley.
But yeah, that must have been his thing, is sneaking in a little bit of the nip.
I didn't look at the title screen too close in the arcade. Was there nudity in that one as well?
No,
okay,
that was added in on the Amiga release.
That was dumb, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a dumb move. Anyway, he did Beach Volley, a game called Ivanhoe, Cabal on the Amiga, and Liquid Kids on the Amiga, which also didn't get a full formal release. The graphics on this were done by, I believe these are brothers, Philippi and Lionel Desolé.
Desolé.
Oh, you were very good. Philippi did Beach Volley, Ivanhoe, and Snow Bros, and Lionel did Snow Bros. And the music on this was done by Pierre-Eric Leroux, who did Beach Volley, Cabal, Ivanhoe, Liquid Kids, Pang, and Play. So these guys did a lot of the same stuff. So they're probably on the same team, working on a lot of the same games. This debuted for a poultry sum of £25, 99p, the big money. And again, was one player only, ACS, OCS. We sort of went over the plot of this thing, so there's not a whole lot of reason to go back into that. I mean, it's not like they changed them. I will say I looked through the pack-in book with this as a slim offering, Bo. I don't know if you looked at it.
Not a lot of backstory, no novella in there.
It's got the backstory, but the backstory is not what I would call riveting. It's pretty much summed up in the opening. You know, if you could pull your eyes away from the topless girl.
That is something. That's another thing that we can hang on the cap of Old Toki, is that it does make an attempt to tell the story as you move through the stages. So that hats off to Toki for that.
Now, the game has 6. Here, let's get into the nitty gritty here. The game has 6 stages. You do get an overworld map, which we both enjoy. It's not what I would call the most beautiful overworld map, but it is one. It's very, again, it reminded me of Ghosts and Goblins, or that kind, where it goes from one left to right as you go through the overworld map.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 6 stages: the Labyrinth of Caves, Lake Neptune, Caverns of Fire, Ice Palace, Dark Jungle, and the Golden Palace. I've been to the Golden Palace, but it was a far different place than this is. And again, like Boat said, trying to rescue the lovely lady. So the Amiga, how did it do on this thing? Well, not bad. I mean, I'm going to judge the Amiga version that's based on what I played on the arcade version, okay? As far as I'm concerned, the Amiga, they did a pretty good job converting this game over, such as it is. You know what I mean? It's one of those, I think, Boat. I mean, Toki controls well. Toki, I played the 2-button variant of this. I'm guessing you did as well.
I did too.
And with 2 buttons, I thought control-wise, Toki, and I'll get to the caveats, but control-wise, I thought Toki was controlled pretty well. The spitting was surprisingly good. I mean, it really was. Like, if you think about a game like Turrican 2, that's got you've got the full, area above you. You've got you're killing stuff. Like Toki, to me, I would take the Toki control so Turrican got any day of the week. It'd be far more accurate.
Question. There's
you
no
know
question.
what I mean?
I would take Toki's control. I'm right there with you.
I mean,
Turrican
in some ways. Go ahead.
I think if you grew up playing Turrican, then you probably love the way that Turrican controls. But if you grew up playing a lot of Japanese shooters, then you're gonna like the way Toki controls better, because he controls like a ship that's an ape.
I don't know if anyone's compared Toki to the Turrican 2 guy, but I'm going to do it. Because if you think about it, Toki can shoot upwards and at angles upwards and left and right and ducking. Okay? He's got all those shots. Now, he can't rapid fire like Turrican can, but he can move around with those shots. Yeah. And it's just easier to control with accuracy. That's my opinion. And you don't have to hold anything down to fire him up. He just goes. He just shoots. So, and you get the flamethrower, you're in. So I'm going to give the game credit for that. This game has sound and sound effects. Okay, that's something. Boat.
It's got different music on every level.
Every level, plus boss music, which is nice, and certain situational music. Because there's a couple places where they're like they're not full bosses, but like in the level bosses, which is nice. It's got background. It's colorful. It's very colorful. You got the jungle and fire and ice, and they do a good job rendering that stuff, I think. And it's got the majority of the stuff that you're going to play in the arcade, not all of it. And it's not as, like, for example, the ice level doesn't have the shimmer, for example, that the arcade does, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's not 100% accurate, but I mean, I think it's a more than a noble try, frankly. And it's a pretty good-sized game. You get 6 levels to play with, and you get the majority of what you're going to see in the arcade. So I'll give it credit on all that stuff. And like I said, the end bosses are goofy, but they're different. You got to give them that. So, I mean, before I get to the bad stuff, Bo, what do you, in terms of the positive stuff to say about the Amiga version, what do you got?
Everything you said, I agree with.
Oh,
This is an excellent port. This
yeah,
is an excellent port. And again, whenever we do these shows, we always kind of have to judge the game on two levels. Like, is the game good? And that's a question by itself. And is the port good? And in this case, the port is excellent. It
yeah,
is amongst, if it's not the best Amiga port of an arcade game in terms of accuracy, and in terms of what they were able to leave in, it's up there. It's up
yeah,
there. I was shocked that they included all the music tracks. I was shocked that they included the boss music. I was also shocked that they included all the bosses, and all the bosses animate the same way that they do in the arcade game.
yeah.
Um,
More or
the
less, I
the
agree. Yeah,
the graphical considerations that they make, resolution, screen real estate, etc., are very, very minor. They still kept all of the Ghosts and Goblins style map with a little story on there.
yeah,
The ending is still present. I mean, I believe that by 1989, um, it's possible, and maybe this is something that had to do with Tad too. They saw the value in sharing code with the with Ocean on this one, because I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm not going to say that this French development team aren't geniuses, but to get this level of accuracy without the source code would be very, very, very difficult. So I'm
yeah.
guessing that Tad, unlike maybe some of the other developers, Japanese developers, actually wanted to sell some copies. They figured to do that, they might as well give them as much help as they could to make the best game they could, because this is an A+ port in my view.
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder why we didn't get more action out of the French development team at Ocean. I
Yeah,
mean, these guys,
yeah,
and we've covered a couple of these other games that they did. We may have to. I have to go back and see what we thought about. Like, I mean, for example, we looked at like beach volley, which you looked at with
with Bill.
Bill,
Hmm.
and then but I think we looked at Cabal, and I've played Liquid Kids, and it's a pretty good port too. So I mean, that tells me that you got someone in here that at least you're right gives a slight crap. I mean, we're looking at the side by side if you're watching the video. I mean, it's obviously more washed out and the levels are shorter, but I mean, it still looks it looks good given the limitations of the screen. I should mention, by the way, I didn't mention this when we were looking at the arcade. The overworld map, that text that's on the Amiga version that looks kind of janky. It's just like in the arcade. So
Right,
like they just
right.
copied the janky, sort of stupid looking text that was in the arcade. Which okay, that was their choice. Um, the music in the arcade also, it's not my favorite. You know,
Hmm.
and so the Amiga music is also not my favorite, but again, I think they met the criteria of porting the songs. So I'm not going
Right.
to give me trouble with that. Now, let's talk about the gameplay proper. And this is where I think this game is, again, I'm not going to necessarily fault the Amiga people. I will a little bit. Toki you get one hit and you're dead. And this game is very. This is where the Ghosts and Goblins comparison comes in. This game's incredibly cheap.
Hmm.
I mean, it is very cheap. Hidden dangers where you have to memorize placement of stuff. Stuff explodes and just scatters shots all over the place, despite the fact that you shouldn't be anywhere near it. That it's just stuff. Fireballs that just travel the entirety of the screen, which is stupid. It's a hit detection window that is questionable. Let's just go there. In fact, there's no question. It's incredibly sensitive, and it's too sensitive. And many times I would get killed by something that if anyone had any common sense, that wouldn't have been part of the hitbox. I like a game that gives you a generous hitbox. This one is
Hmm.
not generous. It is tight. If it's anywhere near you, you're dead. Many times I would get killed and not know what the heck just happened. You know what I mean? It's because
Hmm.
something had flown across the screen that I'd shot a minute ago, and a little fragment had fell on me, which I thought was dumb.
Yeah.
But mostly the cheapness of this game, and when I mean cheap, I'm talking like stuff that on the ground that where you have to jump that you can't see flying out at you.
Hmm.
Stuff put off screen that starts showering you the second you scroll the screen high enough. That's another problem. There's areas of the game where you have to jump to scroll the screen high enough to see what you need to do, which I never like that. I found this game I didn't cheat, Boat, and I found the game um, playable to a point, but it was hard for me to get through. I couldn't get past the second level, even with my continues. It took me forever to get past the first level. I mean, many tries to get past it, using all my continues, and then I instantly got killed. You may have done a better job.
I lost patience with this pretty early on.
Yeah.
And I invoked the trainer mode so I could see the rest of the game.
Nuts. I didn't know about the trainer mode. I wish I'd known about that.
In particular, I wanted to see how well it stacked up against the arcade levels.
Uh-huh.
And because with the arcade game, you can just keep on plugging in quarters and keep going, and you can make your way through the
Although
game.
it's similar in terms of like the hitbox. I mean, the arcade game's tough too. That's why I hate to kill these guys on it, because that was the arcade.
Trying to be faithful. But yeah, this is a game that I would become frustrated with. However, if you look at the reviews on Lemon, a lot of people beat this game, so I think that it is beatable, given a certain amount of patience and willingness to put up with the cheapness. You're memorizing patterns, you're memorizing locations of things. But like I said, as a game, this is probably a C game. But as a as a port, as a showcase of how well an Amiga could do up against an arcade machine in 1989, this really makes the Amiga the Amiga comes out smelling like roses.
I agree. And let me ask you, since you got to play some of the higher levels I didn't get to, I saw levels where he was in like a mine cart. I mean, there's some and a lot more swinging and stuff. There's some they don't just sit on their laurels. They actually put in some different stuff in there, didn't they, Bo?
Yeah. This is not a game, because sometimes you fire up the trainer mode, and even when you have unlimited lives or whatever, you just get bored playing it.
Yeah.
But this game always was throwing new stuff out at you, new different enemy types, different mini bosses, different things for Toki to get into. So the level design in this game I thought was quite good.
I think this is the kind of game I can absolutely see that people were beating. And the reason I say this is, as I played it, the first level, I was getting killed like real quick. And then I played it, and you play it because of the way the game's set up. You repeat the same level over and over and over, and eventually, I got good enough to roll through the level pretty easily after a spell until the ending parts. The boss I had all kinds of trouble with. So I can see how people could get good at the game if they had like we've got less than a week to play these games. If I sat here and played this game and it's the only game I had for like a month, I'm sure I could get pretty good at it. But I mean, it is the kind of game that I'm much like yourself. I got frustrated with it and irritated because the deaths were not. When I died, I was just like, man, I died because of the shrapnel of that plant. That's a crappy way to go. It's not like a proper death.
Right.
Other differences, I mean, to the arcade, just is the Amiga version does add a bar at the bottom that's got your stage you're on, the scores, just to shrink the screen down a little. I wish it didn't do that. The arcade doesn't do it, and still has that information.
I think it has to do. I know, like, I don't know much about how the Amiga works, obviously.
Yeah.
But whenever I see that, I think about different text display modes, like on the Atari computer. You had to do that because you couldn't have the graphics and the text display. But with the Amiga, you wouldn't think that would be necessary.
Right. I just think they love that's a. I mean, at least it doesn't say ocean at the bottom.
Right. Yes.
I mean, it's not like I'm talking probably 1/8 of the screen.
It's not offensive really at all. Yeah.
But I mean, it's still. I don't think they needed it. And the arcade game, that's really, if I put these side by side and took away that bar, it would be an even more close comparison, because of they're quite similar, just with the lack of colors. So I mean, here we are. We're in a weird spot, boat, where we don't necessarily like the source, but we can't fault the Amiga's version. So in terms of that, would you recommend someone give this a whirl?
Absolutely, because it shows you that the Amiga was capable of arcade quality ports, despite what you may have played in the past.
Yeah, I agree. Something I was reading about, Bo, and I think you vaguely mentioned, but I was on Moby, I was looking over the notes, and they were mentioning, or no, it was Wiki in this case, they said the NES version of this. Have you ever played the NES version of this?
I have.
It says they have a health meter. Now, is this a completely different game, or is it?
No. I touched on this earlier.
You mentioned it, but I mean, it's totally a totally different game.
No, it's totally the same game. They
Oh,
give you 2 hearts. They give you
oh,
2
so
hearts,
that's
so
the
you can
health
take more than
meter.
1. Yeah, you can take more than 1 hit,
Uh-huh.
and, but other than that, and it looks not good. I mean, the NES version and the C64 version are about on par with each other,
Uh-huh.
and they are several leagues below the Amiga version,
Does
several.
so you actually you tried this on the NES?
Yeah.
Did having that extra health help?
Yeah, I mean, it lets you live 1 hit longer.
Yeah.
So, in
When I
terms of
read health bar, I was hoping a substantial health bar would be there.
no, it's not like the boss health bar where it's
Yeah.
forever. But I mean, it does because essentially what a health bar or what the hearts give you is it gives you twice as long to explore to figure out what's going to kill you. And so you're dying. You're essentially dying half as often, which is a good thing in my
Yeah.
opinion.
It's funny that you pick up coins in this, and it's the Mario. You pick up 30 coins to give you an extra life, but I
Hmm.
mean it's otherwise the coins don't do anything. And in terms of we cover a lot of these types of games where they have tons and tons and tons and tons of pickups. This one has practically none. Aside
Yeah.
from the fireballs we mentioned, you can get a helmet, which is dumb as we mentioned, and the coins. And the only other thing you can get is an extra man. So I mean, it's
Hmm.
it's like the exact opposite of Super Frog.
And the extra lives in this game are very sparse. It's
Mm.
not you're only going to run into maybe 3 or 4 over the course of the whole game. But yeah, again, we're talking about how Pixel Vixen had a great comment on our last video where she talked about European game development being like the Madagascar of game development, how they were sort of isolated from the rest of the world. And by 1989, the Japanese had already moved on past the give me a million pickups in my platforming game phase versus that was just getting started on the Amiga.
And there you go. There you go. So I mean, overall, a fun game. I did look this up on eBay to see how it did, and in terms of eBay, you're going to pay. You're looking anywhere from 97 to 98 to 104, 105 bucks, and this sold for 98 bucks box to both.
This
Uh,
is an expensive game on a lot of platforms. The NES version of Toki, which I've never seen in my life.
yeah,
At first, I was convinced that this was an EU only release. I was like, well, this
yeah,
has got to come out in Europe, but it was only released in the United States. It was not an EU release. That cart goes for about $100, so
no
it's a
kidding.
rare game.
In terms of how this came in with the reviewers, I was actually quite curious about this when I looked it up. So, the people at Lemon have this thing at 7.96, a very high score, and the people over on the lower score is 81%. So that's real
Okay.
good. In terms of the contemporary, the the scores that were contemporary when the game was released. And this apparently got a re-release in '93. I don't know if that's when they released because I saw it listed as 91/93. So I saw that there was a CD 32 version for sale. So I don't know if
Really
that's what they're calling. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny because it's not listed anywhere as being on the CD 32, but I saw someone selling it. So I don't know if someone put a gimmick or it was
Mm.
released. I'm not sure about that, but um, anyway, scores ranging. Amiga Action gave this an 86, Amiga Force 88, Amiga Format 78. It's funny, I read the article and they were pretty happy with the game, but they talked about how it crashed a lot. That's something they
Oh
brought up, and I didn't have it crash on me.
no.
The
I wonder
Joker
if
gave
that's
it
something. I wonder if that's something that might have been fixed with the WHG load release.
possibly. And it's funny, JOTD is one of the guys that worked this because he did a lot of the stuff with the WHD load.
Hmm.
Amiga Joker 77, Amiga Power 87. So lots of stuff in the 80s. The average rank, after it's all said and done, 82%. So not bad. Would I consider this? I think this is an A plus conversion of a C game. So that's where I would set. I would say I would put this somewhere, and if I was going to rate it in terms of a percentage, I'd put this somewhere in the, I don't know, 75, 76. I mean, if you can get past my hang-ups and the fact that it's really hard, you could probably have a good time. We've played much, much, much
Well,
worse games.
okay. Let's take out the fact that it's an arcade port. Okay.
Okay.
If Toki magically appeared on the Amiga,
Yeah.
I would give it an A. Because I mean it is head and shoulders better than a lot of other Amiga games. Just as
Yes.
in its genre is an action platformer. it's got so many things going for it.
Yeah, I would agree.
The fact of the matter is, though, is that it's a arcade port. As an arcade port, putting it up against other arcade games, it is not very good.
Right.
And so I've got to sort of, I've got to kind of coat my review in different flavors, depending on how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Boat, because at the end of the day, and it's something else that I worry about, because like I found this game unappealing, as we mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't.
And
I'm with
that
you.
doesn't help me review the game because it's not. There's a lot going for the game, and also some people may not find it as repulsive as I do, and I think you could really have a good time with it. I mean, but you have to understand what the game plays dirty. But once you get past that, I think there's fun to be had. Boat, I think me and you are pretty much in agreement on this one. When it comes to Toki, I'd say there were several steps from the line, but the guys that were converting it, they did a good job, a real good job.
Welcome to Retro Rewind. I'm your host, British Jones. Whether you're into the Amiga, Commodore 64, or Tiger floral print speed suits, Retro Rewind has all you need from the friendly hosers of the Great White North. Looking to upgrade your Amiga? Check out the Amiga OS 3.2.2 Kickstart ROM for just $18. Or maybe you need a C64 or C128 diagnostic harness. Grab one while they're hot. Don't miss our best sellers like the 1541 Transit Card for just $1, or the incredible Amiga Coin Cell Battery Adapter. Shop now at Retro Rewind Limited and bring your classic computers back to life. Retro Rewind Limited. Frank's the man.
All right, Aaron. I hope all of you out there in listener land are enjoying the Amigos Summer of Arcade, where we take a look at arcade classics on the Amiga throughout the month of July and August. Aaron, what do we have coming up next week?
I'm sure it's going to be another arcade classic.
Oh, man. Is there any more infamous port on the Amiga than Outrun? I don't think so.
No. Man, I'm hoping that guy has that remake done by next week. Come on, dude, hurry. You got time. So next week, Boat, we'll be looking at the infamous Outrun.
That sounds good, man. US Gold will present it, as always. So thank you as always, for watching. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/AmigosPodcast. We'll see you guys next time, and until then, adios.
Amigos is made possible by contributions from listeners like you. Patreon supporters help choose the games we play, receive exclusive magnets, and get access to the Amigos Retro Gaming Discord server. Visit patreon.com/AmigosPodcast if you'd like to support the show and join our community.